Joining us now, he's not in London, he's in Cairo, Eddie Yeranian. Eddie, longtime contributor since the beginning to the John Fredericks Show. Eddie is our man in the Middle East, great guy. Eddie is also a key part of the America's VOA, Voice of America, and a veteran, grizzled radio correspondent with CBS Radio News. Eddie, grizzled as you are, great to have you with us.
Thank you, John. Seen a lot of presidential visits to various places and lots of wars. So, nothing really new here, but every day something different happens.
Okay, let's get to Idlib. Start there, and then we'll work backwards, I guess. The president tweeting out that he's upset about the bombing in Idlib. Now, some people say, well, wait a minute. Idlib is the last hotbed, the last basic forfeiture of al-Qaeda. What say you?
Yeah, there are a lot of Islamic militants in Idlib, various groups supported by different countries, and it's not the kind of people you'd want to have in a city near you. I can understand why the Assad government would want to sort of neutralize the pocket. Part of the issue here is that they straddle the main auto route, the highway between Aleppo and Damascus, the capital, and they are keeping that closed. So it's sort of a vital economic interest there. And, if you have terrorists in a city next to you, they're able to fight you in many different ways. So, I mean, it's not ideal to have them there. Perhaps this is not the way to go about closing them down. And also they're there because this is the product of all the negotiations and evacuation deals from other cities across Syria where they have pulled out of and been bussed up to Idlib. So the Turkish government, which is very close to Idlib and has ties to many of these groups, militias, is obviously not pleased, and they're not pleased about the thought of getting more refugees. I think they have about 3.5 million Syrian refugees on their soil already, and the prospects of another million more coming over the border is not pleasing to them.
Edward, let me ask you this. Was the president's tweet appropriate?
I think when you see pictures of children that are being crushed under collapsed buildings that have been bombed, you're likely to react that way. Of course, the White Helmets group, which is supported by a number of countries, including our own, it used to be at least, the British are supporting it now, are putting out these videos in order to do that, to have that effect on public opinion. And while I sympathize with the civilians, I see propaganda going out in all directions. And clearly no one put out the same propaganda when we were bombing Raqqa, when we were bombing Mosul. And, civilians die when you bomb from the air. This is the product of bombing from the air, whichever country is doing it.
And basically what the Syrians are saying is that's still, Idlib is still controlled by al-Qaeda, and it's their last bastion of terrorist activity, and they want to root it out, and the Russians backing him in that. So just tell it straight. I mean, should we even be interfering in what the Syrian, now, Assad's government, he's still there. Should we even be interfering in what they're doing, especially because they're bombing one of our enemies?
Yeah, I think we would normally understand this sort of thing if it weren't for the fact that we were supporting these people and a lot of their other militia, Islamist militia allies or adversaries across Syria over the last 7-8 years since the revolution began. But the problem is there are people inside the bureaucracy who still hate Assad and still want to take him out. And there are countries that still want to take him out, I think partially because of their economic interests here. They want the north of the country for some sort of a pipeline from the Gulf. I think that's still the gorilla in the back room that no one wants to talk about. But yes, I mean, Assad is inevitably going to take over this pocket, whether it takes him a year, 2 years. and no matter how much blood is going to be spilled, and the Russians are going to back him, and that was clear a year ago. It's nobody really wants to pay the price and see all those civilians that are hurt, but ultimately it looks like this is the only solution to putting the country back together again.
John Fredericks Radio Network, good to have you with us today. I'm your Godzilla of the Truth. We're with Eddie Yeranian, longtime contributor to the John Fredericks Radio Show, live Cairo, Egypt, our expert in the Middle East, veteran, CBS Radio, and Voice of America. So, Edward, look, I mean, we spent a lot of resources in Syria, which are original no matter what the government says in the U.S. publicly. The original objective of us getting involved in there, it doesn't matter what Obama says or the neocons say or Tom Cotton or anybody else, was regime change. That was the goal. That's what they wanted. They wanted Assad out. And the president came in and said, we're done with regime change. And now I look at this tweet and it's like, okay, well, the reason we're even involved in this thing is because you tried to change the regime again. You couldn't do it. And now the whole thing is a mess. But you're bombing an enemy. But then on the other hand, the people in Idlib that are being bombed that should be our enemies, some of them got aid from us. So the whole thing is upside down, right?
Yes, a lot of these groups were supported by the U.S. One way or the other. I mean, Mr. Brennan was heavily involved in supporting some of these groups via the Turks in various cases because he wasn't doing it or didn't want to do it directly, but a lot of these groups were trained by us or our allies, and I think the idea was just to put them on the ground and think that they're going to overthrow Assad, which they weren't able to do. And no matter how ugly they are, we were supporting them. And Hillary Clinton said at one point when we were trying to looking at bombing Damascus in 2013 to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, they asked her, well, aren't you worried that supporting these Islamist militias is going to do damage to the West, to Western countries, to us as well? And she said, well, we supported the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and we got Al-Qaeda as if it was nothing at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a failed policy then. It's a failed policy now. Edward, I'm going to go to a quick word from our sponsors. When I get back, I want to talk about a piece in the New York Times today. I know, rarely do I do that. But the title of it is The Most Powerful Prince in Washington. And they talk about Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ, who I have called for some time the puppeteer of the Middle East. And I think he basically tells Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia what to do. I want to get your thoughts on that, where the relationship is going, also on Brexit. And another tweet the president sent out today, which is that, hey, I think they should just walk away from the Brexit negotiating table and go from there. So the president going on foreign soil and giving advice to the UK, not normally something that's done. I want to get your thoughts on that all when I get back. Keep it right here. Eddie Yeranian, Prince Mohammed bin Zayed, older, wiser than Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. He's the de facto ruler of the UAE, United Arab Emirates. He's almost unknown to the American public, except for us that follow this stuff. But he controls a sovereign wealth fund worth $1.3 trillion. Edward, that's with a T. And he's among the most influential foreign voices in Washington with a huge network, as you know, of lobbyists that run around here, paid a lot of money by the UAE. And a lot of people saying that MBZ is the puppeteer of the entire Gulf, that he basically is the advisor to Mohammed bin Salman. And a lot of the things that bin Salman takes the hit on, MBZ has been there. The other thing is UAE and the Saudis are aligned right now in this war against Yemen, but they're not natural allies, right? They're actually natural enemies. And a lot of people say this is a alliance of convenience that will soon fray and fracture when things go south. What's your analysis of this?
Well, clearly they've been portrayed in the Arab media as good friends. They're always, Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed, they're always embracing each other very warmly whenever they meet. There was a picture of them embracing warmly over the weekend at the 3 summits in Mecca. And I think that they get along well. That's just been my impression in the media. Who controls what? Well, clearly Mohammed bin Zayed was sort of in power or in a position of power longer than Mohammed bin Salman. So I think Mohammed bin Zayed would have been giving him lessons and showing him the ropes in a number of cases. So perhaps that does mean he wields a little bit more influence, or he has a senior influence on Mohammed bin Salman. Mohammed bin Salman is also younger than Mohammed bin Zayed by about 25 years. Mm-hmm. But who is more influential? I think Saudi Arabia is clearly more influential in the Middle East than the UAE, and I think Mohammed bin Salman is the person who is mostly, for the most part, calling the shots there, despite the noise in the media recently that his position has been diminished or weakened. I'm not sure it really has. I know the son and the father, King Salman, disagree a bit about the Palestinian issue. That's never been a secret. So that's come a little bit to the forefront at this weekend summit. But I still think, unlike the New York Times, that Mohammed bin Salman is more powerful than Mohammed bin Zayed.
Why do you say that?
Well, because Saudi Arabia is the largest country in the area. It's the most wealthy country, even though perhaps the United Arab Emirates has a larger trust fund or a sovereign wealth fund. Saudi Arabia also has had to bail out a lot of countries, bail out of its own political morass in recent years due to lower oil prices. So it's been weakened by the geopolitical situation, falling oil prices, and pressure on the regime and pressure on Mohammed bin Salman in the succession to his father, who is an old man. And, he had to spend a lot of money to sort of bolster his son's position. But traditionally, Saudi Arabia is more powerful, has a more powerful network across the Middle East, relations with more countries, and can pull more strings than the UAE if push comes to shove, I believe.
Great analysis, Edward, by the way. What did you think of Mohammed bin Salman? They're having this summit this week in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh, I believe, and he invited the Emir of Qatar there. That looked like an olive branch. Of course, the Emir didn't go, probably right move politically because he didn't know what the environment would be. So he sent his, I think he sent his deputy Emir there. Is that maybe nobody at first they didn't invite Qatar, then they went so far as to invite the Emir. Is that kind of recognition that, look, this whole blockade has failed and it's time to find a way to mend the fences here and get the Gulf back cooperating with each other, or am I reading too much into it?
Well, I'm just going to give you my own take because I don't know that a lot of other people necessarily agree with me, but I think perhaps this is one instance where the father, King Salman, may have overruled his son and invited him because the invitation came from the king. Obviously, all these invitations come from the king officially, but I think the king himself might have wanted to iron out the problems with Qatar. The son perhaps doesn't because there's a bit of rivalry. They're both very close in age, the Sheikh Tamim and Mohammed bin Salman. And a lot of the vitriol that's been on the airways of Arab media over the recent months has been coming from Mohammed bin Salman. So I don't think he necessarily wants to patch things up, but I think the father might.
I think you're right on that. Okay, final thing. I've only got a minute. The president, in an interview with, I think it was The Sun, backing former Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to replace Prime Minister Theresa May, saying that the Brexiteers would do an excellent job. Isn't this the U.S. getting involved in somebody else's selection of leadership? Isn't this what we're complaining about? Or is there something here that I've missed?
Well, yes, I think so. But I mean, there is the perception on the president's part and some people in Washington that it was the British who interfered in our election and not the Russians, and because of this Steele dossier. And right. I think perhaps those ill feelings have overpowered the traditional niceties of not backing people in your foreign allies' domain on his
Well,
turf.
certainly not covertly, right? I mean, we've done it overtly. We've always done this overtly, and so have other countries. But I think the precedent was started with Obama when he wanted Netanyahu out in those elections back in the day. Eddie, I'm out of time. I got to get to the bottom of the hour. Great job. Love having you on. You're the man.